Hi guys, welcome. And who dat? I'm Joe. And today I want to examine the possibility that Taysom Hill could become a Pro Football Hall of Famer. I'm going to compare him to Hall of Famer Frank Gifford, and we're going to look at the numbers and we're going to figure out for ourselves if Taysom Hill could actually one day end up in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Well, you know, this past weekend, the Saints beat the Cleveland Browns 35 to 14. The Saints scored 21 points in the fourth quarter. It's a 21 to nothing shutout in the fourth quarter. And we wanted this team to finish good, and you can't finish better than that, I don't think. So great job by the Saints, and Taysom Hill had a lot to do with that. Now, Taysom Hill turned the ball over twice in this game. Usually the player of the game doesn't turn the ball over twice, but my goodness, what what can't Taysom Hill do? 7 carries, 135 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. He throws the ball twice. He did throw an interception, but he completed one for 17 yards. And then as a receiver and a tight end, he catches 8 balls for 50 yards. I mean, guy can do no wrong. He returned a kickoff for 41 yards, I think, in the game. Now, you look at Taysom Hill, and he is the Swiss Army knife of the NFL. He doesn't get a lot of respect in that regard because he's not a one position guy putting up Pro Bowl numbers at that one position every year. And a lot of fans around the league, think that he's just an overpaid guy that, when we had Drew Brees and we were putting Taysom Hill at quarterback, people thought we were crazy. And now we pay him like 10 million a year, and if you're not a Saints fan and you don't watch the Saints game in and game out, you don't see the value in the guy. And then he has a game like he did this past weekend where the entire nation has to take notice. Oh, yeah, he's capable of doing all of that. I mean, a very unique football player. Now, we had players in the past that would play both sides, offense and defense, way back in the day, the Iron Man game. Not a lot of people do that anymore. You got Travis Hunter in Colorado, Buffalo college territory doing it, playing cornerback and wide receiver full time. Don't think he could do that in the NFL, not full time. I could see him playing every down at cornerback and then highlighting at wide receiver from time to time, or vice versa. But yeah, being an Iron Man like that and playing both sides of the ball full time, yeah, I don't think that's ever going to happen in the league anymore, ever again. But Taysom Hill is still a unicorn. There were lots of players in the 40s, 50s, and 60s that did all kinds of things. And people like to compare Taysom Hill to those guys. Can't really compare him to anybody in the league now because there's nobody really in the league that does what Taysom Hill does. There's players in the league capable of doing some of it. I think of a guy like George Kittle who could probably run as a halfback. He plays fullback and plays tight end, and he can split out wide like a wide receiver. So, yeah, he's got a lot of it covered. But can he play quarterback? Can he return kicks? And is he a special teams ace going down the field and making tackles? It's this combination of things that Taysom Hill does. I mean, basically, he does everything except play the offensive line, and he doesn't play defense. He doesn't kick the ball. He doesn't punt. So, yeah, Taysom Hill is the NFL's Swiss Army knife. And the only player I could think to compare him to would be Hall of Famer Frank Gifford. Taysom Hill and Frank Gifford are the only two players in NFL history to have 30 rushing touchdowns, 10 receiving touchdowns, and 10 passing touchdowns. This is a unique category, and there are lots of players in the past that have done lots of different things, but I'm going to use Frank Gifford as the guy to compare Taysom to because they're the only two that have reached this milestone of 30, 10, 10. 30 rushing touchdowns, 10 receiving touchdowns, 10 passing touchdowns. So at first, because most people don't know who Frank Gifford is, and if they do, they think he was that longtime commentator on Monday Night Football. They're not quite sure about his career in football. So I decided to look up Frank Gifford's numbers, look up Taysom Hill's numbers, and we're going to pull up a chart and compare them. But first, I'll tell you a little bit about Frank Gifford. He was a halfback at USC primarily. He was drafted by the New York Giants in the first round with the 11th pick overall in 1952. And Frank Gifford was 22 years old when he was drafted. He played with the Giants for 12 years, and he was a halfback, he was a flanker, and he was a safety. So he played defense. Um, Frank Gifford was the NFL's most valuable player in 1956. And he was also the NFL Comeback Player of the Year in 1962. He missed the entire 1961 season. He was a six-time first-team All-Pro. He was an eight-time Pro Bowler. His numbers retired with the Giants. He's in the Giants Ring of Honor. Yeah, he was a special player and deserving of the Hall of Fame. So I decided to compare Taysom Hill to Frank Gifford because they both have the 30 10 10 similarity. And let's see how they can be compared. Well, these are the metrics I'm going to go by. They're the only ones we can compare the two with the numbers I could find. Now, Frank Gifford played defense. He played safety. He had two interceptions in his career. He returned one of them for a touchdown. But there aren't any stats on tackles, so I can't give you a comparison for tackles. But I'm certain that Frank Gifford would have that, being that he played safety in his career. And Taysom Hill has a total of, I believe, 17 tackles on special teams. So I'm sure Frank Gifford has way more tackles. So let's look at the numbers. Throwing the ball, Frank Gifford, I can't find him listed as a quarterback anywhere, but he has thrown the ball 63 times, completed 29 of them. That's a 46% completion percentage. He has 823 passing yards. He has 14 passing touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Compared to Taysom Hill, who was a full-time quarterback for a while, 193 out of 302 attempts for Taysom Hill. That's 63.9% completion percentage. 2,369 yards passing, 11 passing touchdowns, and as of this weekend, 9 interceptions total. So, obviously, Taysom Hill is a quarterback out of the two. Way more passing yards, a better passing completion percentage. I believe that Gifford, being a halfback and a flanker, just had the opportunity with the ball in his hands to throw it from time to time and, manage 14 touchdowns, which is insane because 63 attempts for Gifford, 302 attempts for Taysom Hill, and Gifford still has the edge in passing touchdowns. As far as running the ball, yeah, Frank Gifford, that was a big a big thing for him. 300 or 840 carries for 3,609 yards. That's an average of 4.3 yards a carry. He has 34 rushing touchdowns. He fumbled the ball 48 times. That's insane. That's insane. You think Taysom Hill's a turnover machine? No. 48 fumbles. Compared to Taysom Hill, now keep in mind Gifford played 12 years. Taysom has only played 8 years. Taysom has 432 carries for 2,427 rushing yards. That's an average of 5.6 yards a carry. Taysom has 33 rushing touchdowns. So Taysom almost tied with Gifford in rushing touchdowns and a hell of a lot less carries. Taysom's got that magnificent 5.6 yards per rush, which is insanity. You look at Gifford averaging 4.3 in his career per rush is really good. And what Taysom does is just insanity. Taysom has also fumbled the ball only 17 times. So, Gifford has a hell of a lot more turnovers than Taysom when you consider the interceptions and the fumbles. But you still got to give Gifford the edge for touchdowns, and we'll see if Taysom can get a few more rushing touchdowns this year and actually have more rushing touchdowns than Gifford in his Hall of Fame career. Uh, and receiving the ball, Gifford was a big time receiver. That's what I remember now. Gifford was out of the league by the time I was born. And I remember Gifford as, 27 years on Monday Night Football with Al Michaels and Dan Dierdorf. I mean, I go back way far and remember all that, but I did see lots of highlights of Gifford, and usually he was receiving the ball. Gifford had 367 catches for 5,434 receiving yards. That's an average of 14.8 a catch, and he has 43 receiving touchdowns. That is wow. Taysom, on the other hand, doesn't get that many chances to catch the ball. 94 catches for 906 yards. He averages 9.6 yards a catch. Taysom has 11 receiving touchdowns in his career so far. So, those are the numbers that you can compare these two with, along with kickoff return. Uh, Frank Gifford had punt returns to his credit. He returned 25 punts for only 121 yards. That's an average of 4.8 yards a punt return. Taysom doesn't do punt returns. Taysom does kick returns. So Gifford had 23 kick returns in his career for 594 yards. That is 25.8 a return. Taysom Hill had 20 kickoff returns for 489 yards. That's an average of 24.5. So pretty close on the kickoff return average. Gifford a little better. And yeah, that's how good Frank Gifford was. So you give the edge to Taysom as a quarterback. He hasn't found the end zone enough, in my opinion, as a quarterback. And the remainder of his career, I'm sure Taysom will spend as a receiver and a runner. He'll never catch up to Frank Gifford receiving the ball. And I don't think he'll ever catch up as far as yards go, total yards. So, you know, the deal is Taysom's been playing 8 years and Frank played 12. So could Taysom possibly play 4 more years? It's not likely. Frank Gifford was 22 years old when he was drafted. Taysom Hill was 27. So after 8 years in the league, Taysom right now at 34, he's already older than this must have been the age Gifford retired at 34. So I think Taysom's got maybe a year or two left, and then he's going to call it a career. So looking at these numbers, and you see the total touchdowns, and you see that Frank Gifford is in the Hall of Fame with 8 Pro Bowls to his name, and Taysom having 0. There's a reason Frank Gifford's in the Hall of Fame. That amount of touchdowns is insane. 77, 87, 91, 91 touchdowns, 92 if you count the interception return. 92 touchdowns for Frank Gifford, and Taysom has 55. So it's a huge difference in touchdowns. So if you go by that metric and plus some of the other stats that are here, you know, Frank Gifford is the superior player, and Frank Gifford has the 91, 92 touchdowns, which will really get you in the Hall of Fame. Can 55 touchdowns by Taysom Hill get him in the Hall of Fame? Well, I think some other things need to be considered. These are the things we can compare these two to. Frank Gifford also, playing defense, has an edge there where he played safety his whole career. Frank Gifford also kicked the ball. I wonder if Taysom could do that. Frank Gifford was on extra points. He was 10 out of 11. He must have had to do it in a pinch or something because I don't think he was ever a full-time kicker. But he attempted 11 extra points in his career and made 10 of them. He also, which is insane for a running back and a, flanker and a safety. He also attempted 7 field goals. He only made 2. But I tell you, if you're in a pinch, go ahead and roll out Taysom Hill and see if he could do it. Well, Frank Gifford gave it a shot. And besides that, playing safety for the Giants, having 2 interceptions, he also recovered 17 fumbles. And yeah, I don't think Taysom has a single fumble recovery to his credit. So, besides the things we can compare these two to, Frank Gifford, was a kicker and, an outstanding defensive player. So, overall, Frank Gifford definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And comparing Taysom to Frank Gifford, maybe you tell yourself Taysom doesn't belong there. But to conclude this video of mine, I think that Taysom is the kind of player that is so unique that he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And when you look at the last 30, 40 years of football, there's just not a lot of players that can put up those kind of numbers. I mean, yeah, when you compare Taysom Hill to Frank Gifford, Taysom pales in comparison. But we're trying to compare a football player to Frank Gifford, this stud of a Hall of Famer who, was the 30-10-10 guy. And there's not supposed to be another 30-10-10 guy, but there is. We have a 33-11-11 guy with Taysom Hill, and he's got the rest of this season and possibly a few more years to add to his stats. And I think about the people that vote for Hall of Famers, and I think about the credentials that they may use, the standards that they want to set for certain players. You get a receiver up for it, you get a running back up for it, you get a quarterback up for it, and you can compare stats. But then you get a guy like Taysom Hill, and you're thinking to yourself, how can I compare this? He's not a Hall of Fame running back. He's not a Hall of Fame wide receiver. He's not a Hall of Fame tight end. But man, he did a lot and still does a lot. And when you can be a 30-10-10 guy like Frank Gifford, that's when I think the voters for the Hall of Fame are going to be like, nobody else has ever come close. Nobody else has ever done this except for a Hall of Famer. When you view it by that metric, then it almost seems like you have to put Taysom Hill in the Hall of Fame. I mean, nobody else even comes close. So this guy's coming close. It's wild. But I think as a Hall of Fame judge and thinking about football and the way it is, and like I said, having these standards to compare other wide receivers to, other running backs to, and you get a football player like this, maybe that's the standard. Maybe 30-10-10 is the standard. And if anybody ever reaches that, they deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. I'm not sure, but if I was voting for a Hall of Fame candidate, that would be most impressive to me. And if I wanted the integrity of the Hall of Fame to ring true, then a football player like Taysom Hill, he deserves to be in there. Yes, it's wild. I know. I've seen Hall of Famers go in that I'd never heard of before, and most people that get into the Hall of Fame, they have 8, 9 Pro Bowls to their name, and have these career records that they've set. The only NFL record Taysom Hill is has something to do with uh, most games as a quarterback without turning the ball over. I think 7. I think I'm pretty sure that's an NFL record Taysom Hill holds. You guys look that one up for me, but I think he holds the record for most games at quarterback without turning the ball over. 7. Okay, so anyway, yeah, that's my video. That's the comparison. I can't compare Taysom Hill to all these other players. We've got people comparing him to other athletes in, other sports. But yeah, the one I will choose is Frank Gifford because of the 30-10-10, and I think the 30-10-10 might be the Hall of Fame standard. When you're considering a place in the Hall of Fame for a player that's this unique. That's what I got for you guys this week. I'm Joe. Subscribe to my channel, Rosenfield 10. I love the Saints. I love making videos about them, and I will continue to do so. If you like and subscribe and comment, then it helps me out a lot. I could use the help. I'm your friend or your coworker who loves the Saints. You guys talk to me about it in the comments below. Let me know what you think. I think Taysom Hill should be in the Hall of Fame. And until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Who dat?